Welcome to Dental Skool, a podcast for business-minded dentists. Your host, Billy Rickman.
Dr. Michael Frazis, welcome to Dental Skool. How are you, sir, mate?
I'm good, thanks, Billy. How are you?
I'm very, very well. And look, as part of the research and obviously getting to know who you were and a little bit of background about you, when I was doing this leading up to this episode, I saw that you graduated Dental School or Dental College, became a dentist in 2012. So it's been 12 years since you've been to Dental School.
12 years, a long time.
I don't know if that makes you feel wise and experienced or just feels old. Because I know when people say that to me, it just makes me feel old.
Yeah, it just makes me feel old, but it's one of those things that you don't realize how long it's been, because you're just having fun along the way. You're sort of going to things, you're doing things, you know, you get married, you have kids, you kind of tick all the life boxes, and then you look back and like, shit, I've graduated 12 years ago. Like, what have I done with my life in 12 years to justify being out here and for 12 years? It's crazy.
100%. Like I turn next weekend, actually, this weekend coming, I turn 42. And I distinctly remember as like an 18, 19-year-old, I was one of my first jobs. And some of the people I was working with are about 40. And I distinctly remember like looking at them thinking, you're so old. But they were like, I don't feel it. I still feel when I'm 20. And like, that's how I feel now. But yeah, it's like, it just goes so quickly. But you seem to, I think you sort of downplayed yourself there though, when you said, you know, where's it all gone? It's been 12 years, but what have I actually done? Mate, like I said, I did a bit of research into you and your experience and your accolades over the last 12 years as a dentist. I don't think it's been the modest journey that you just mentioned. So, do you want to? We are going to talk a lot about personal branding today, about creating your own personal brand. That's the sort of the topic of today's lesson. But I mean, it doesn't matter how much content you push out there. There's still so many people who will never have heard of you, right? It's unbelievable. Like one of the biggest speakers in the world, obviously, is Tony Robbins. And I went and saw him in Sydney last year, then went and saw him in Miami again in December. And when I came back to Australia, and people were like, so why did you go there? And I said, I went to see Tony Robbins. Now, he is, I would say, uncontested, actually, the biggest speaker in the world. He's been around for like 40 years or perhaps even more. And still, like 9 out of 10 people still like, who's Tony Robbins? Like, how do you not know who Tony Robbins is? Yeah. But that's the thing, right, with personal brand. It's like people still, it doesn't matter how much content you push out. It's like there's still so many people who don't know. So you, as far as my understanding is, you are currently a dentist down in South Australia.
Yep, correct.
But more than that, well, not more, I'm going to say more, but equally to that, you're also the Director of Education for RipeGlobal.
Correct.
Right. So do you want to give us a little bit, just for people who don't know who you are, a little bit of a background about your experience, what you're up to at the moment, and also what your role is with RipeGlobal and what RipeGlobal does?
Yeah. So like you said, dentist, graduated in 2012, been working out of Adelaide, South Australia for pretty much all that time, bounced around between a few practices, have settled into the one practice will be 10 years next year that I've been in the same practice. So a lot of longevity in the one sort of job, one location. I summarize what I do clinically is basically taking things apart and putting them back together again and making people look pretty, and then sort of basically restorative dentistry and surgery, using those two skills to take things apart and putting them back together again.
Yep.
My job with RipeGlobal started from a few years ago, about sort of 4 or 5 years ago. I've been doing teaching for about 8 or 9 years, and then it kind of evolved and did more and more teaching with different people along the way, my own things and things with Lincoln, things with Michael Melkers, my own things. And then I started doing more and more teaching, got involved with RipeGlobal, started as an educator with them, and then got involved behind the curtain, started making courses, developing courses, and now I oversee the development and management of all of the courses and all of the education, all of the educators. So I think we've got 60 educators, 400 students, 500 if you include all the people who've graduated and passed and ones about to come in. And at RipeGlobal, what we do is we fast track dental careers. So we take any dentist from any walk of life, from wherever they currently are in their clinical abilities to where they want to be. And we can take you from, doing simple restorative work, so your crown and bridge, your bread and butter things, all the way to complex full mouth rehabilitations. We can do implants, orthodontics, and all of those bits and pieces, and basically just improve dentists using our education system.
Yeah, it's so good. And obviously, like, you know, I've worked a little bit with you and had a few conversations with Dr. Lincoln as well. And, you know, as you are aware, you came to my Gold Coast Sales Mastery for Dental event. And it's a conversation I've had with Lincoln as well. It's like, there's so many, well, not actually, there's not so many. There's only a few stages to being successful in any profession. But let's talk about dental. It's like, you have to be able to first get the patient into your business, which will tie into what we're going to talk about today with your personal brand. You then have to be able to be an effective communicator to get that person to trust you and provide the relevant information in the right way to get them to say, you're the person I want to be with. Because obviously, like, competition in dental now is huge, with free consultations available at most practices now around Australia. The power really is with the buyer, with the patient, because now they can just hop between, you know, one of my colleagues, she had a smile makeover, and she went to 15 different smile makeover consultations before she chose somebody. And so you have to understand what the reason is to be able to, you know, to gain their trust and for them to say yes to you above all else, above anybody else. And then the third stage, which is what Lincoln is spoken about, and I guess where RipeGlobal comes into it, is you also have to be able to correctly diagnose and then be able to correctly perform the treatment. Because again, that's where the breakdown is, right? You can get the patients in, you can be an effective communicator, but if you don't know how to, you know, determine what they need and then actually perform the treatment, then step 3, it falls down. So I think it's really important that you have to have all 3 of those things aligned to be successful in, like I said, in any industry and business, but specifically in dental. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. And to bring it back to obviously the personal brand, you can have the best personal brand, get someone in the door, do the best communicating that you can possibly do, sell them the dentistry that they want and they need. But if you can't deliver it, then they're not going to refer the next person. That person's not going to refer the next person. And at worst, it affects your personal brand. And then you actually end up worse off than where you started. Yeah. Whereas if you go, you know, I'm not the best communicator, you know, I fumble around a little bit, I'm only getting a couple of patients in the door because my marketing is all rubbish. But you can actually do good quality work, guaranteed they will tell someone else, and then you'll get another person.
Right.
Regardless of how it may, exactly. It's all the internal marketing that you do, the branding and all that. Correct. And a lot of the people that are going to be watching this, a lot of other people, a lot of dentists aren't practice owners. They're associates. The day that, you know, gone are the days where we had every individual dentist had their own practice. It was a solo practice, one dentist running the show. And then, you know, when they went to retire, they had like a associate that had just graduated and they mentor them like their son or their daughter. And then they hand the keys over as soon as they're about to, you know, retire. Those days are gone. It's group practices, it's corporates, it's one person at the head of like 15 chairs. There's a lot of associates out there. And what they don't understand and realize is exactly what you're saying, is there's a lot of internal marketing that happens with you yourself, your abilities, your personal brand, and all those bits and pieces.
100%. So that's a perfect segue. So let's get stuck into it, because obviously, you know, whenever I reach out to people, or when somebody reaches out to me and says, I want to be part of the podcast, there's always a conversation around, what do you want to talk about, you know? Mm-hmm. And for me, as we just, you and I spoke about off camera just before we started this, whenever I do a podcast episode or a video interview, I'm always like, I don't have a specific set of questions. Like if you saw my screen now, I don't have any questions that are sort of, you know, preloaded, ready to go. I always just like to have free conversation, because I think that's when you really have the truth, right? It's like when you have structured conversation, sometimes it can be a little bit fake, sometimes it can be too polished, and there's no real substance to it. So I like to have free conversation. But when I reached out to you, and I said to you, what do we want to talk about? And you probably gave me a list of about 4 or 5 different things. And we settled on this one because the conversation we had was, what are you really passionate about? And like, obviously you are passionate about dental, and you're passionate about education and things like that. But I think personal brand is such a good topic right now, because number one, it's so important. But number two, there's still such a gap between people who are understanding how important it is in today's dentistry. Like the difference, like you said, and the example I always give to people is, there's no point having a restaurant with the best chef if nobody knows about it. All you have is an expensive chef and food that's going to waste, right? You actually have to get people to know that the restaurant exists, firstly, and get them to know how great the chef is. And that's where personal brand and marketing comes into it. So what is your, let's go right back. Where did your journey first start with personal branding?
All right. So when I graduated, I obviously, like anyone who graduates in dentistry, knew nothing, knew no one, had no personal brand. 12 years ago, the internet had just come out. No, it wasn't that long ago. Facebook and dental Facebook side of things had only just started to mature. So there were a lot of online groups where people were asking for help, or they were putting out small pieces of content, like really small, like, oh, this is a fun little case that I did. There were a lot of people that were doing a lot of lectures that had transitioned from, this has gone back a few years, from traditional slides and taking photos and, mounting them and all that kind of stuff to digital photography. So obviously digital photography has been around since, early 2000s. I'm not sort of that old, but it had only just started to, come together. And this whole like online community and dental community and online education just wasn't a thing. It only just had started to develop. So that's when I graduated. So I was starting to post questions on online forums, post photos and be like, hey, this is some crappy work that I did. I know that it's crappy. Can you help me? Because I just graduated, and that's the kind of stuff that we were doing in dental school. You have a case, you show it to your tutor, and then they help you. So I was like, oh, I've just graduated. I know nothing. The person that I was working with was helpful, but not to the extent that I wanted them to be. And so I was just finding random mentors on strangers online. And in doing so, I was improving really, really quickly. So as I post a case up, they were like, oh, you should fix these things. I'm like, okay, cool. So I fixed those things. Then the next case, oh, I was better than the previous one, but I'm still pretty crap. And then you just keep doing that enough times, and suddenly you're posting cases and other people are starting to ask you questions. Other people are starting to go, oh, Michael's posted a case. I'm going to look into it. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then you start to realize that there are other people sort of following you. And so I'm like, oh, maybe I should make a specific page for these dental things, because I don't want to just post it on my personal page. I'm like, my friends don't really care about dentistry. All my friends are dentists, but your family and stuff don't care.
Yeah, it's a real quick way to lose friends, actually.
Yeah,
I think most
just
people
posting
learn that at
business
the early
stuff.
stage. Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'll just separate the two halves, the personal and then the business side of things. So then I'm just posting cases and cases. Then your follower count starts going up. You're like, hold on, there's kind of something to this. And then as you're starting to develop and improve your clinical, as I was starting to develop my clinical skills, it was getting to the point where it was being noticed by some people saying, oh, look, you're pretty good at this, or you're pretty good at that. Not to the extent where I wanted to teach someone or someone wanted to teach me. They were just like, oh, look, you're actually improving. You're doing this, pat on the back. So you get those sort of the dopamine rush of being acknowledged and, posting cases and, scrolling and all that. It was getting addictive. And then I did a course with Lincoln, and I was pretty rubbish, and he helped me through a few things. But one of the things that he got me to do after the course was what he got everyone to do after doing one of his courses, his hands-on courses. He got you to come and help the students at his treatment planning course. So if you did his full mouth rehab hands-on course, his big flagship course that he was doing back then, he asked you to come back and help at the lecture that he was doing. So I came and did that, and I really enjoyed it. And then other people really enjoyed it. And then people started asking me questions online after the course. And so that kind of grows and develops into getting my face out there, getting my name out there. And I kept getting invited to things to, help. I was always in the background. I was always a background character. And then at some point, the background kind of slowly fades away, and you're left standing in front of the stage because enough people have asked you enough questions that you're suddenly at the front of the room, not at the back of the room anymore. And that's how it kind of developed. And then one feeds into the other, where I'm doing more things live in person. And so I have to build up my following online so that I can promote myself for people to come to courses and this and that. And I'm at the point now where I'm like, okay, well, I need to build my online profile, my social presence, so that I can, teach and educate more people and give away more of the knowledge and the content. And so people want to come and learn from me and other educators as part of the RipeGlobal fellowships that we do. So the personal brand that I've developed is dental education, dental knowledge, and all those bits and pieces.
You touched on so many good points there that I kind of wish I was note taking now at this point because there was so much good content that came out of that. The first thing, and I'll touch on a couple of them, and then you can sort of respond to each one. The first one I think is that when you're just starting out and you're seeking that advice, you found it, but also you found through your own experience. But I think also people need to understand this lesson is that most people, especially when they're starting out, they crave leadership. And I don't mean leadership as in someone telling them what to do, but someone who is giving them that guidance and someone who's giving them that advice, and they crave it. And if they then see your posting and see your content consistently, and they like what you do, then all of a sudden they're more attracted to you because they not only like the content, but they like the person behind the content as well. And, for most people, they say that in the world, there's only around about 10% of people who are naturally leaders. And most people, 90% of people are followers. And there's no problem. There's no, one is not better than the other. But if you've got such a massive ratio difference there, then, there's a real position or there's a real place for people to step into that leadership role because most people are followers naturally and they want to follow the advice or follow the guidance. And, some people call it a mentorship. You kind of were giving a little mentorship online when you first started. And I think that for anyone who's starting to create their personal brand, I think that's a really important thing to understand is people are consistently, it doesn't matter if it's 2024, when you started in 2012 or decades ago, people are still always craving for that advice. And the power of social media is that people can get this advice for free. And, Gary Vaynerchuk talks about it in his book, Jab, Jab, Right Hook, Jab, 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 Right Hook. And the whole sort of philosophy behind that is that there's too many marketers or there's too many people out there who their first go-to when they're starting to create a business or starting to create a brand is to ask their audience to give them something. It's like, buy this from me, download this for $100 or come to this or whatever the case may be. And they're putting their hand out where what you were doing and whether or not you knew you were doing it at the time or whether it was just, you kind of learned that lesson as you went. But what you're doing is giving free advice. And that's a good lesson for business owners to understand is that when you're giving advice away for free, ultimately, if you do it consistently and for long enough, you create this void where people say, hey, I want to actually fill that by giving something back. And that's kind of where you're at now, right? It's like you've created this massive audience. And now for your future events or future training, things like that, it's almost like a tap that you can just turn on because you already have that engagement, you already have that audience, and you can say, this is what we're doing. If you love me and you love the content, you love what we do, then come and join us. And I think that it's a really important lesson for a lot of business owners and people who are trying to establish their brand to understand.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, I didn't know that specific thing when I started. Like the closest that I had to that philosophy when I graduated and started posting cases and having other people like want to learn from me was kind of like, I call it the piano lesson, like, a quote phrase or whatever you want to call it, where basically the piano teacher just needs to be one lesson ahead of the student. So I was just like one case ahead of someone else. So I couldn't give advice to someone who had done 40 years of crown preps because I'd only done 1 year of crown preps. But I could give advice to someone who had never done a crown prep before because I was one lesson ahead of it. But what's happened is over the years, I've grown and developed and I've done more and more and more. And so I can do more and more teaching to other people outside of, that sort of bandwidth. I don't have to wait until I've done 40 years of dentistry to teach someone who's been doing dentistry for 40 years. Obviously, what I teach them is different, but I can teach anyone below me. And now I can start to teach people that have more experience than me, but not at the same sort of. It's a bit different when you're sort of teaching people more advanced than you. But that's kind of like anyone starting out going, I have to wait 40 years to then go back and start teaching. No, you just have to be better than the people that you are teaching in the thing that you're teaching them, basically.
Yeah. And there will always be that group. Always. It's not like there's going to be a saturation where everybody's going to pick up those first 2 year people. No, because the next class is going to graduate. And now there's a whole new batch of people who are at that stage, right? And
correct.
And I think it as well with when we were at when you came to the Sales Mastery event, and I saw you did a video follow up on the success cycle, which is potential. So everybody's got a level of potential, then action. You take action, then you get results, and then that increases belief and certainty. and then that increases your potential, and it goes around as a cycle. It seems to me, though, as well, one of the things that you've done really well is that you've been consistent with it. Because there could have been a lot of, and there's definitely a lot of people in every industry across the world, especially with the invention of social media now. There's a lot of people who start, right? They go, I'm going to do this, and then they get to a certain point, and then they stop. But it seems to me you've been consistent over the years as well, and that's kind of been one of the key ingredients to your success. It's not like you just stopped at saying, well, I'm just going to be that one lesson ahead, and I'm just going to consistently teach these people. As you've done it, you've grown, you've evolved, and you provide more content. And now, as your experience and your knowledge opens up, so too does your audience. So what are your sort of lessons on the power of consistency? And has that been something that's been intentional for you? Like you've had to remind yourself you've had to do it? Or has the experience kind of just allowed the momentum to pull you along?
So it's definitely something that is. So when I was younger, so I'm a very sort of introverted, shy person from the get-go. People think that I'm intimidating because I sit there and I don't smile. I'm like the quiet person sitting in the corner that doesn't talk to people. I mean, I can turn it on and off because obviously we're having this interview, this podcast, and I'm not sitting in a corner. But I had to do something to get myself out of my shell. So I did a lot of different things early on. I did some sort of drama stuff at school. I did some first aid training where I was like teaching like young kids first aid. I was involved with that. And then I also, to get myself even more out of my shell, did some bodybuilding. So, go up on stage and flex your muscles, that kind of thing. Bronze yourself up, do all that kind of stuff. So I did that So I did that for a couple of years. There's some photos floating around online. But
for those of you who are listening to the podcast, when we do the post-production of this episode, I'll make sure I edit and splice in some bodybuilding.
Yeah, that should be good. Yeah, I'll put it like right here somewhere.
Yeah.
But what I learned with that, there's some very valuable skills, because at the end of the day, I had to train, I had to show up, I had to do things consistently every single day. I had to, wake up early to go for a walk. I had to eat whatever 6-7 meals that I was doing a day, regardless if I wanted to or not. I had to go to the gym after work, and then I had to, exercise before I went to bed. There were things I had to do regardless if I wanted to do them or not. And so that sense of discipline, when you've been doing it for that many years, kind of gets ingrained into you. And the discipline and the motivation, people kind of think that you need to be motivated to do something. But the motivation comes from the discipline in like, I don't have any other choice. I have to do this thing. And then the motivation comes from like, you start doing it and then it's enjoyable, it's fun, and then you sort of get it. You're motivated by the end result, not the actual work that you're doing. But I also found that it was actually very enjoyable doing the work. I enjoy doing, these podcasts. I enjoy doing, content and putting things out. Like people ask me, oh, what do you do in your spare time? What's fun for you? It's like, what I'm doing is fun. Like my life is fun. That's why I live the life that I live. It's not like it's a chore where I'm having to go, I have to make another piece of content. It's so daunting and annoying. It's just, I have to do it. I enjoy doing it, and I just do it. Like the discipline of just one foot after the other, just getting it done. It's kind of the only way.
Yeah. So you did initially have to build that resilience and build that discipline. But once it's there, it's almost like riding a bike. You don't ever forget it.
Yeah.
And anyone who's listening to this podcast now thinking, because I can relate very much so to what you're saying, especially around being disciplined around health and things like that. But it's not to say, anyone who's watching this and thinking, oh, I'm just not like that. It sounds to me like these people don't have any bad days or periods where they feel a bit deflated or a bit unmotivated to do things. I don't know, I'm not going to speak for you, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but, everybody has those periods, right? Like you're just not feeling it, you're not feeling it. But it's the discipline to not let those periods go on for too long, because especially in the space of what we're talking about today with personal branding, it's like you can get forgotten about like that. You can spend 5 years consistently putting content out. You disappear for 3 months, and now you're just forgotten about. And worse than that, somebody else takes that space. But I think that the metaphor you use around the gym and being disciplined around it, and you just do it, is perfect. And I think one of the things I just want to quiz you on, you said that, and I agree with you so much, where you said people think you have to be motivated to start, but that's actually not what it is. And you said it's the end result. Do you think it's the end result, or do you think it's the journey? Is that what motivates you? it's like, it's not necessarily the end result, like, because
Yeah.
you're growing, but it's like that constant growth and constant process on that
Yeah,
journey.
I probably didn't phrase it appropriately. I was kind of like talking out loud and out loud, and the words kind of like ran in front of me. But it is the journey. Like I enjoy. I have ideas in my head of what the end result needs to be. We're talking like big picture, goals written on a whiteboard over here kind of thing. But they constantly change because I get closer and closer to that goal, and I'm like, well, my goal's not big enough now because I actually achieved what I wanted to achieve 5 years earlier than I thought I was going to achieve it. And so you move on to the next goal and you move on to the next goal. And if I just kind of stop at that goal and you're like, okay, what's next? There's always going to be like, what do you do when you reach that goal? And if you don't enjoy the journey, if you don't enjoy the process behind reaching that goal, then you kind of stay at that goal and you're like, I've achieved financial success, or I've achieved, 100,000 followers, or I've done this, or I've got the house, I've got whatever your goal is. And then you go, what's next? And if you didn't enjoy what the process was to get you there, then you're not going to copy and paste it and then move on to the next thing and then move on to the next thing and keep growing. You kind of plateau. And that was a thing that I had when I was doing the bodybuilding. You kind of meet your weight goal and then you plateau, and you either need to eat less or exercise more. You have to change something to then get to that next level. So there's always something that I'm doing, and I will plateau. There are times where I've plateaued, where I'm like, I'm not getting more followers. I'm not getting more reach. I feel like I've stagnated in my clinical dentistry. There were periods of times where I outgrew the practice that I was working at. And I was like, I cannot achieve the financial and the clinical goals that I have working at the practice that I'm in, because they don't do the work that I want to eventually do. And so I can't like recreate this clinic that I have in my head at someone else's clinic that doesn't do that kind of work.
Yeah.
So I had to then move on. So I had to change something. You either have to change your environment or change yourself to then move to that sort of next level.
Yeah. And do you think that the journey of personal branding that you've been through, do you think it's fast-tracked your success and your knowledge that you have? Do you think it's kind of forced that to be much quicker than it would be for somebody who perhaps isn't on that journey? They're just going every day about going into their practice. They're doing they're working on their patients. They're performing the treatments. They go home and these things. But when you're creating content, it's almost you either are going to create a bunch of content that you don't know the information for yet, so it's forcing you to learn it, or what it also does, it creates or strengthens that part of your brain. And Tony Robbins calls it the reticular activator system. And the way he explains it, it's like, if you went to buy a car and you bought that car because you thought that's a really cool car, like I saw one of those the other week and it looked really good. You buy it, and now all of a sudden you see them everywhere. And the reality is those cars were there all the time anyway, but your brain, it just wasn't, your RAS, your reticular activator system, your subconscious brain was just not filtering that to your conscious brain. And so because it wasn't important, now you own the car, now it's important, right? And so if you're creating content, if you're creating that personal brand for yourself and you're out there all the time creating content, it forces you, in my opinion anyway, it forces you to fast track your learning because you're researching, you're studying, your thirst for knowledge is much higher. But also it's activating that part of your brain which says, oh, that was an interesting thing to learn. Oh, I want to relay that message. Or like, whereas otherwise that information could just bounce off your brain and it's there, but you're not paying attention to it. So I just wonder what you think about your own journey and what sort of advantage it's given you in terms of fast tracking your success because you've committed to creating this personal brand and content online.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why at RipeGlobal, we say that we fast track dental careers, because anyone can do amazing dentistry and learn all of these kind of skills over, 20, 30, 40 years. But what we're trying to do, and what I tried to do, was distill it down from 40 years of dental knowledge. And I've done it in like 10 years. I've still got a long way to go, but, I've done it in a shorter amount of time. Yeah. What we do with our students, which we try to condense that into 2 years. And the way that we do it is built on the way that I learned, which is taking the photos, reviewing the photos, getting feedback, posting those photos online and basically being vulnerable and being like,
Oh,
hey, is this the best quality work that I can do? And then there are so many cases that I will take a full series of photos. I will review those photos. I will find all the errors in it and go, I can't post this online because I've made a silly mistake. What do I need to do to not have that mistake again? So that the next time I post a case, I can then not have that error. But I'm at the point now where if I do make an error, I can obviously post it and be like, hey, don't do this because then this will happen. Because, I've got that level of sort of knowledge and sort of clout. But like you said, if I don't know something, then I either can find someone to help teach me or learn about it. So if I'm doing a lecture, there's a lot of things that I don't know about. And so if I'm doing a lecture on, let's say, occlusion, in order to write the lecture, anyone has to go out and then read all the research, watch other lectures to write that lecture. So it's kind of like if you're doing 1 hour of lecture, it might take 3 hours of research to write the 1 hour of lecture. It might take actually 4 days to write the lecture, but still about 3 hours of knowledge to like condense into 1 hour. So there's a lot more that goes into the teaching. You kind of have to learn it in such a way that you can distill it down into its essence so that someone else can understand it. But if you yourself don't understand it, it's very difficult to then teach it to someone else, especially online now where it's like, 60, 90-second sound bites. You're kind of condensing a 2-year program topic into 90 seconds without rambling and making people go, oh, that makes sense. Like it's actually quite difficult to do that if you don't have a lot of like research and knowledge and stuff in the back of your head, like you said.
Yeah, and especially with attention spans now, I think that 90 seconds is more like 15 seconds now. But and one of the advantages of doing these long form podcasts is we can get a lot of like good sound bites from it, where not just from promotional point of view, but also like you've already said a bunch of things today where I'm like, oh man, that was such a great little 20-second sound bite that helps people, But there's one thing that you touched on there, and I think that it's if we didn't talk about this today on this topic, we will be negligent. And that is you spoke about the fear of posting things that weren't done correctly. And there's two aspects of this. Number one, when I first got into dental, one of the things I didn't anticipate, but I learned pretty quickly, is that dental can be quite political, right? Like the dental industry. A lot of people talking about different people, and a lot of times it's not necessarily nasty or anything. I don't want to put paint the industry with a tainted brush or anything like that. But it's like, because you're medical professionals, because everybody expects such a high standard of work, you have high standards of both yourself and the industry as a whole. So when you post something online, people have these fears, and I know this from private conversations. People have these fears that they're going to be judged like quite aggressively by other people in the industry, their peers. So there's that side of it, the medical professional side, and whether or not they're going to be judged by their peers. The other side as well is just broadly speaking about social content, about like, I don't want to look silly, I don't want to say the wrong thing, people are going to judge me for it. And, there's only a few basic fears that people have. And two of the biggest fears that people have is fear of rejection and fear of not being enough. And when you put content online, geez, you better be ready to be able to handle those two, because, I'm not here to sugarcoat it. One of the things I like doing about these podcasts is having real conversations. I'm not here to make sure, to make it feel like it's all pretty, rainbows and butterflies and unicorns. Like the reality is, once you commit to posting online, especially consistently, I'm not talking about like 1 or 2 posts. I'm talking about consistent online content where you have a mix of images, videos, like short form, long form, all these different things. When you commit to putting that up consistently, you are going to have those feelings come up: a fear of rejection and a fear of not being, and the fear of not being enough. You're going to be confronted with that pretty deeply. So what is your advice then to people who have that fear? Because I guarantee you 95% of people who watch this podcast, even after your inspirational words, and we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of how to create a personal brand soon. But even after they listen to all your inspirational stuff and your journey, they're still going to sit there going, I want to do it. I know it's important, but I'm shitting myself, and I don't want to be confronted with that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to start by saying that all of those fears, like you said, I have, every dentist has, We're all, the type A personalities. Every single dentist in our course has an aspect of imposter syndrome. I have an aspect of imposter syndrome. There are days where I'm like, I'm not good enough to be the person that everyone thinks that I am. You get promoted at work and then you're like, shit, did I even deserve that promotion? Like, what's happening? Are they seeing something in me that I'm not? Like, people are complimenting me for things and I'm like, I don't know how to take it. It's very awkward.
Yeah.
But, I've had mentors, Michael Melkers, we speak, daily, and sort of he's helped me with a lot of things. I have a therapist that I've spoken to about these kind of aspects and just getting out of my own head, because we're drilled in. I don't know if you know a lot about the dental courses when you're at university, but it's drilled into you that the work that you're doing isn't good enough. You should reflect on the work that you're doing, what you can improve on each and every time that you're doing it. And you're doing that for 5 years. You have a journal of reflection, or you're telling your tutor what's wrong with the work that you're doing. And so you get very good at finding your own faults, which is great from a public safety perspective, because you're very good at going, oh, I did this wrong. I should do this a bit better. I should improve, so I'm better for the next patient. Awesome. Needs to happen. Understand it completely. What needs to also happen is when you start winning, when you start doing things well, you need to also learn to go, I'm not my own mistakes. I can actually do good work. Yay me. The problem is when you start off, you're not winning a lot. You've got a lot of errors. You've got a lot of mistakes, and you need to not take it personally when other people or you yourself see problems in your work. So because you did something that was wrong or something that was an error, you made a mistake, that doesn't mean you're a bad dentist as a whole. It means that you made an error on this specific case. Learn from it and improve, and then look back and reflect and go, this next photo that I took of a similar case is better. The previous one wasn't as good. Therefore, I'm improving and I'm getting better. Whereas if you're not recording your work and you're getting the improvement trajectory, you just see yourself as like, I made a mistake. That's my baseline. I can't be better than that mistake. And you kind of put a ceiling on yourself instead of going, okay, how do I make this better? Okay, I'm better. Have I improved? Yes. Okay. How do I improve from here? And then you just take small little incremental steps. Yeah. That's what we do with all our students. That's what we do. That's what I did when I graduated. But all of mine were public facing because I didn't have access to anything else. And I had people commenting, nasty things under my photos, and I didn't like it, or I had to develop a thicker skin, or maybe it's the generation that I'm in that I was able to sort of, brush it off because, we were born kind of online. And so people bullying you online didn't make as big an impact because I could just turn the screen off and just walk off and do something else. Whereas if you were not born with online stuff, then it's a bit hard. And if you only know online stuff, then it's also a bit hard. So maybe I'm just a unique, millennial that can live in both sides of the online and the non-online side of things.
Yeah. And so what advice would you give to people though, like, who do have those fears? Is it simply a matter of you've just got to go through it? Like, there's no way around it. There's a lot of different things that you can give examples of in life that are like that. And especially related to fear, a lot of the time it is just about, well, unfortunately, there is no way around this. You've just got to go through it. You've got to put yourself out there. You've got to create the content. You've got to, be true to who you are, your values, your principles, what you think is good, and have that constant self-improvement. There's no way around this though. You're just going to have to understand that you're going to get this if you want to go on this journey of creating a personal brand. So what advice would you give?
I'd say the same thing that I say to my kids. I've got a nearly 5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. And it's, if they say that they're scared of something, and the things that they're scared of aren't, things that are inherently going to hurt them. They generally are fears of the unknown, scared of the dark, or falling asleep by yourself, or, riding a bike when you don't know how to do it. It's kind of, I tell them, like, it's okay to be scared. It's okay to have the fear, it's not okay to not try. You can try and be scared. Like when you go on a roller coaster, you're scared. Like that's the enjoyment that you get, because the human body can't actually distinguish really well between a fear response and an excited response. Physiologically, they do the exact same thing. You get sweaty, you get like, like not heart palpitations, you get butterflies in your stomach. Some people go, oh, that's, before a first date, I'm really nervous, I'm really excited to meet this person. Other people go, I feel sick. But it's the exact same feeling in your stomach, that sort of butterflies. It's either does it give you nausea or does it give you excitement about what you're about to do? So reframing it in your head to be, it's okay to be scared. Like I get scared when I post like a really big case or, some marketing thing where I'm like, oh, this is a little bit cheeky. I don't know if this is going to sit well with some people. Am I going to ruffle some feathers? Am I going to do this?
Yeah.
But then I post it anyway. And then people will either say good things or they say bad things. If they say bad things, then I learn from it and I do better next time. If they say good things, then I sort of keep going down that pathway. There are safer ways of doing it rather than like putting yourself completely out there to strangers. You can post it in like online forums, which are a little bit more closed. You can, share it to people that you know and trust, like colleagues or mentors that, you might have in the space. Yeah.
With WhatsApp and things like that, you can create a small little WhatsApp group with some people who, are like are friendly and supportive, who are like-minded, who are on that sort of growth journey together, and they want feedback, but they're not going to criticize you. And I think that's like great advice. It's a good place to start if you are of that mindset where like this scares the shit out of me right now.
Yeah.
As we've said a few times, it kind of needs to happen. And I think when I do sales training and from the sales training events, and I do a lot of sales coaching, like one-on-one or within businesses and things like that. And one of the things I always stress, and you would have heard me talking about this, is that confidence is the number one ingredient that you must have if you want people to buy from you, or if you want to, sales is still a bit of a taboo word in dental, but that's essentially what you're doing, right? You're transacting something. You're asking them to pay money for a treatment that you're providing. So it's a sale. And if you want somebody to trust you, then confidence is key. You have to be confident. And people always say to me, like, well, how do you develop confidence? And it's like, well, confidence is a muscle. And the best way I know in my own experience and learning from others who've got greater experience than me, the number one way that you can develop confidence is by doing something that you thought you weren't capable of. And then once you complete it, realize that you are.
Yes.
That is the easiest way to become more confident in anything. And, about 2 years ago, I decided to go on this journey up north, and I flew in from Queensland to Early Beach, and then I got one of those hippie camper vans, and I drove by myself all the way up to Cairns, and I stopped at all these different national parks and went to Walden Falls, which is the highest waterfall in Australia. Went there and just did some random, really, really crazy stuff. And all of these things are kind of, especially because I was doing it solo, took me way outside my comfort zone. By the end of it, as I was driving along these long roads up north, I was thinking to myself, I actually feel really good about myself. And that's what it was. It was like I had done so many things that I didn't think I was capable of doing. But through that journey, I was forced to do them for survival. And then by the end of it, I had developed this greater confidence of myself and what I am capable of. And I think, that goes back to what you're saying about even if you are going to start small, it's not true that you can't do these things. If there's a gun to your head and I say you have to create 100 pieces of content in the next 30 days and post it online to YouTube, or there's a gun to your head, there's going to be dire consequences. Can you do it? The answer is, of course you will do it. So what's stopping you? And it's normally that limiting belief that you can't do it, right? Or that you have these fears around that. But I can promise you, anyone who's watching this podcast and just going on with what Dr. Michael was just saying, it's like you just have to develop that confidence. And confidence is gained by doing things that you didn't think were possible, but forcing yourself to do them and then realizing that you actually can do them.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that, like, I've got a similar experience where, I didn't go in a camper van, but mine was in Northern Queensland as well. Where like I did Lincoln's full mouth rehab course, and this was me. I signed up for it when I was like, I signed up for it when I was like a year out. And by the time I did it, it was like a year and a half, 2 years out. And I had done like nothing. I hadn't done a bridge before. I did one crown the year before in private practice. We did the 7 in dental school. And for, some people listening to this, 7 sounds like it's going to be a huge number to do in dental school. For other people, it's, you shouldn't even have graduated if you only did 7. But I had never done a veneer before. And so I had this full mouth rehab patient in front of me. And, I'm sitting there going, because we've treatment planned it. And I'm like, yeah, we'll do some veneers. We'll do this. I'm sitting there going, I actually have to do it. And I'm sitting there like frozen. Like, how do I do a veneer? And then Lincoln comes over and he goes, have you done a veneer before? And I was like, no, I've never done a veneer before. And he goes, all right, well, I'm going to hold your hand and we're going to do 13 of them right now. So we just did it. And like, I had no other option because the patient was there and he held my hand and we did it and it was all fine. And he bought me a Subway cookie afterwards. So I felt all good. But it's one of those things, like you said, if someone put a gun to your head and said, do this thing, you'd be able to do it, or, some version of it, whether it was good or bad.
Mm.
But I'm doing some online communication courses at the moment, just to improve my speaking abilities. And one of the things that they said in it is you can't see step 2 when you're still at step 0.
Mm.
You haven't even started doing something, and you're like, oh, I don't know what the next step is. Like, okay, I'm going to make a piece of content. What do I do after that? What do I do with that piece of content? Like, how do I then market that piece of content?
Yeah.
How do I use that to increase my conversion rate with getting more patients in the door? Or how do I use that to sell my personal brand? Don't even worry about that part. Like, step 1 is make a piece of content of something. Like, just put a camera up and start talking. Like, even if that goes nowhere, absolutely never post it online. The fact that you've made something goes, that wasn't that hard.
I can do it.
Now I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it better because I didn't like the way I sounded. Maybe I need to get a better microphone. Maybe I need to do this. And then you actually start the journey, which is step 1, step 2, step 3, like put one foot in front of the other. But if you're still at step 0 and you've done 0, you can't see where the journey is going to take you.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about earlier, like you've got like a goal of like, I want to do this thing. But if you don't enjoy and have a process and have a journey to get there, who cares what your goal is? You're never going to reach it because you're not even starting on your actual journey.
Yeah, 100%. And to simplify it even more, it's almost like, baking a cake, right? It's like if someone says you got to bake a cake and you're stressed out because you don't know how to bake a cake, and so you just don't start. Whereas if you go, no, so here's where you start. Here is a list of ingredients. I want you to go to the shops and I want you to buy the ingredients. That's it. That's all I want you to do. The next bit, okay, now this is how much of each ingredient you need. That's it. Like, don't stress on the baking the cake. Just stress on the don't stress, but just focus on the individual steps to get you there. And I think it's a really poignant point because that's even people again who are watching this right now. Again, they understand it's important. They understand the dental industry is changing. They understand that having a personal brand can actually fast track your success and get you more patients, give you more experience because now you're performing more treatments. They understand all of this, but to your point, they're stressed on the fact that I don't know how to get 50,000 views on a video on Instagram. Don't worry about that. Or I don't know how I see these videos on Instagram and I don't know how they put all those text overlays and they do those transitions and make it look so good. Don't worry about that. Or exactly like you said, just focus on standing in front of your camera and just recording a video for 30 seconds. If you love it, great. Now learn the next step. If you don't, great. Record it again and do it a little bit better. And that process is exactly what you need to do. And granted, and no disrespect to you at all, it was a little bit easier to have started when you did, right? Because it wasn't saturated. And so we have to acknowledge the fact that if you are starting out today, it is a little bit more challenging. The space is saturated. There's a lot more people coming into it, a lot more people introducing some more technical aspects of video creation and content creation. There's no doubt about those different things. But it's like anything, right? I'll do it because if I'm wrong, you'll correct me. So with dental, right? First day of dental school, you don't learn how to do veneers, right? Correct. You learn, I assume, the biology and you learn, the basics. And so that's exactly what it is with content creation and creating a personal brand. You have to just start with the basics, practice it a couple of times, then move on to the next step. I think it was such a good point that you just raised there.
Yeah. And like what you were saying with people, they're doing filters, they're doing this, they're doing transitions, they're getting people to edit their stuff and do this and do that. You need to reach a certain level and you reach a plateau and you're like, what do I need to do to then get to that, to pass that? But if you're not even at that point, there's no point in even worrying about those things. Yeah. Like there's a reason why I have kept every single photo that I put up, every case, every reel, everything. And a lot of the earlier stuff is rubbish because people will see my stuff at the moment and they'll go, oh, so amazing. How did you do what you're doing? And I'm like, go back. You can track my journey from the beginning to now. And what I'm doing now with content is I'm actually pulling up the old pieces of like rubbish content that I did and going, hey, this is something that I did like 8 years ago that I thought was amazing 8 years ago. Here is how I would improve it now, or here's how I'll do this so that other people can learn from my own mistakes. Like I'm not correcting other people's mistakes. I'm correcting my own because you need to be authentic when you are online, especially when you're starting out. No one knows who you are. And so if you're preaching to everyone, this is how you do dentistry, this is how you do this is what the literature says, they'll be like, that's awesome, but who the hell are you? Like, why should I be listening to you? Whereas if you go, hey, this is a case that I did, this is how I did the case, this is why I did it this way, what do you guys think? Then you can have a constructive conversation with people. Oh, yeah, that's how you did the case. I would have done it differently like this or that. But someone could go, oh, I've never seen that way before. Maybe I should try doing it your way next time. Yeah. And then maybe you get to the point where you have enough clout behind you that you can start saying dentists should be doing this in general because you've been in the industry long enough that you can generalize things. But if you start out, just keep it personal. Like, this is what I do. This is how I did it. Not this is how you should do it, because people feel attacked.
And when you cross that bridge, when you take that leap from this is how I did it to this is how dentists would do it, again, just coming back to those fears, just know that now you're going to have a completely different response. And that's okay, because it's again what we just spoke about. It's just that next stage. You're just at that next stage. And you will learn that process. Maybe the way you said it was the right thing to say, but maybe your messaging wasn't right. Maybe you used some words that were too controversial. Maybe it just wasn't, delivered the right way to the right audience. And now, exactly what you said, one of the things you said at the start with this feedback loop is like, okay, now you've just got this feedback. You learn from it. There was no failure. You just learn. And that's what you've done. Now you're at that next step. So what I want to do is just kind of tie all of this up now, because I think there's been so many great lessons that you've provided today. And with every podcast episode I do, I always want to make sure that we give people some real meaty substance to take away, right? So in a real short summary, or bullet points, if you want to look at it that way, what would you say to people, perhaps either just getting started or even maybe they just started and they're at that kind of plateau where it's like, because again, anyone who has started this journey will know once you start, your uptake will kind of be quite high initially, right? Because when someone sees a person who's just starting out, you're kind of like the underdog and everyone wants to support you and everyone wants to give you that great positive feedback. And so when you do start out, you'll actually have quite a steep curve, but that won't last very long before you plateau, right? And so there's going to be people at those early stages. And maybe if you can summarize it to even a broader level of people, it doesn't matter what stage you're at, but what sort of step-by-step or bullet point advice would you give to people about creating a personal brand that is effective? And it's not just about getting that dopamine rush that, oh, look how many likes I got, or look how many people watched this video, but specifically, like, what do you do in terms of those steps to create that personal brand in the first instance, get that engagement, and turn that engagement actually into business?
Yeah. So the first thing you need to figure out is, who is your audience? Because in dental, we have two audiences. We have patients and we have dentists. I see many dentists creating content for patients that's actually marketed towards dentists, and people that make things for dentists that actually marketed towards patients. So the way that you speak to a patient and the way you speak to another dentist are two completely different things. The kind of photos that you share, the kind of videos that you make are completely different. You don't make this is how you brush your teeth videos for dentists because they know how to brush their teeth, but you can do it for patients. So pick an avenue and stick with it, especially if you're doing it online. Well, that's where we're all doing it. But if you're doing like on Instagram or on YouTube or whatever, have one persona for patients and another one for dentists, because mixing the two can be a bit tricky in your early years. I know there are some people very high up that mix the two very well, but they already have created their personal brand, and other dentists are looking at their page to see how they are marketing to their patients. Completely different level. So pick a lane and stick to it. once you know that, then you can start just making some content, just whatever it is, and then see what actually sticks. And if you have trouble figuring out what content to make, you can literally just use AI, go on ChatGPT and just say, give me 10 real ideas for a dentist marketing to patients. And then it was like toothbrushing and like fillings breaking and emergencies or this or that. And then just start making the content. You don't have to put it anywhere. Just start making the content. And you might find you make 10 pieces of content. And one of them you're like, hey, I like that one. That one's good. And then just post it up and then just see how that lands. And then just learn from that one and then move on. And if you get someone, not reviewing your work, but just, reach out to someone like, hey, I'm trying to create this personal brand. If I share this video with you, are you happy to like give me some feedback? And most people, if they're not too high up in their branding, will be like, yep, hey, that's cool. It's kind of like the piano teacher idea. You just need to find someone that's one step ahead of you, that's also young enough, naive enough, and not famous enough that they will actually respond to your, DM and be like, hey, this is what I would do differently. But at the end of the day, you're creating a personal brand for yourself. So be true to yourself. There are ways that I speak that are different to the way that, you, Billy, speak. And the way that Lincoln speaks is completely different to how I speak. I shouldn't try to be Billy. I shouldn't try to be Lincoln. I should try to be myself, because at the end of the day, if you're marketing to patients, they will walk through the door and want to see you. They want to see the person in that video. And so if you're not that person in real life, don't be that person in your videos. Like, don't sit there and do like funny, jokey videos if you're not a funny, jokey person. Like, do the stuff that actually resonates well with you, so that when patients respond to that, they get that level of experience as they're walking in the door. And then they're like, oh, this is exactly what my dentist is like. I'm going to share this video with my friend so that she knows that this is my dentist. I'm really happy with them. And then you get it going from there. And then you can worry about going viral and all that other random stuff later on. Just make a piece of content, either for dentists or for patients, put it out there. And then the early content for patients tends to be things like, where is my practice? What kind of treatments do I do? How do I brush my teeth? All those simple things that we tell patients anyway. And I had a YouTube channel at one point where I was just experimenting doing the post-op instructions for patients that I was telling them. I did them in a video format. So I was just literally reading out the instructions on video. And so they could listen back to it in their own time. If they'd lost their piece of paper or whatever, they could just watch it. And so you can make content like that, like super easy. You just read off the script that you have in front of you. Obviously, hopefully do a bit better than that, but that's all you need to do. And then you can send it to patients, and then you might make something that's a little bit more adventurous than that. And then you can just keep growing and evolving from there. There's a lot of dot points there, but
a lot of dot points, but a lot of substance as well. And that's the thing. Like, when you have these conversations, sometimes you can have these great conversations, but there's no sort of takeaways. But I think you summarized it like perfectly. I really particularly, because we didn't touch on that during this episode, which was your first point you made about understanding who your audience is. And it's like anything, Ray. If you go to a barbecue and nobody knows anyone, by the end of the barbecue, there'll be different groups at the barbecue, and all of those people are similar. You'll have like the group of surfers over here, and then you'll have the coffee mums over here, and then you'll have the executives over here, or the gym rats over here. Like attracts like, and knowing who your audience is and then presenting an authentic version of yourself, then you will attract people who will like that. And I even hear it with dentists, like any other stream, but I've heard enough dentists say it's like, the best days when you're doing dental work is when you're working on patients that you like. And the reason you like them is because they're like you. So if you can use your personal brand to attract more people like you, then you'll have a lot of great days in dental.
Yeah, and that's one of the things with the adversity or turning people away. You're turning people away that wouldn't want to come and see you anyway.
Yes.
So you're pre-filtering patients out. So a lot of patients so my content is not geared towards patients at all. It is geared towards dentists. But some patients look at it and go, he teaches other dentists, therefore I should go and see him. But they already know what to expect about me because they've seen it. And, I've had some patients go, oh, can you post my case up online, or are you going to use my case in one of your lectures? And I go, yeah, well, if you want me to, you can sign this form and I'll use it for your lectures. But there is also patients that will probably see it and go, no, that's not the kind of dentist for me. He's a bit too, show offy or whatever. That's fine. I don't need to be the dentist for everyone. I just need to be the best version of myself that I can be. So if I'm turning away a certain population of people, then that's fine, as long as I'm doing the best quality work that I can for the people that do want to see me. And I've got no problem with that. As long as I'm not alienating like 90% of the population by saying really polarizing things.
Yeah, don't be you're going out there. I guess that's some advice. Not don't go out and just because you have one controversial thing that's offensive, don't go out there and push that topic.
Yeah,
you don't want to alienate people. But I could not agree more. And especially because it does. One or two things is going to happen, right? They're either going to come to your business and they're either, number one, going to be a little bit disenfranchised because you're not the person they thought you were. Or number two, you're going to have to adopt a different personality to suit them because they're not like you are organically or naturally anyway. And then that's just a horrible place to be because no one wants to create a fake version of themselves and have to pretend all day long. So
yeah.
I think you're so right, and that's such great advice. And so on that note, I just want to thank you, Dr. Michael Frazis. As you can see on the screen right now, or if you are listening on the audio version of the podcast, you can find Dr. Michael Frazis at symbol Dr. Michael Frazis, Frazis on Facebook and Instagram, and he also has a website, drmichaelfrazis.com, if you want to check out his work and his content. And you can learn some of the lessons, and especially because he did say that you have permission to go back 8 years and have a look at his earlier content and see how much he's grown, because I think that in itself will give you a lot more confidence to grow. So thank you very much for your time today. Really, really appreciate it. I know you're a busy man, and I know that the viewers and listeners would have got a ton of great knowledge and a great benefit from all of your experience. So thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Billy. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks very much, mate. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast to not miss out on any future episodes of this. And you can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at Billy Rickman. Until the next episode, see you later. Bye, guys.